Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
Hey, it's 7.5 minutes past 11 o'clock, and normally the song that we play leading into our special guest every week is a song that relates to them. I don't know that Rebel Yell necessarily relates to the man that we are about to speak to. It is my very great pleasure to introduce to the microphone and via the telephone, of course, a gentleman that I have had the good fortune to know for about the last 15 years during my involvement at another community radio station, 94.1 FM, 3WBC up in Box Hill in Melbourne. His name is Ken Lyons, and rather than us telling you his story, we're going to introduce him to the microphone. Good morning to you, Ken.
Good morning to you too. It's a beautiful morning, I've got to say. I'm very happy to be here and be on your program.
That's very kind. So this voice is Neil. The other very handsome voice that you've already spoken to is Rob. Ken, we probably should get this one out of the road early because people are going to be doing the maths in their head. 97 is how we have you currently aged. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah, 97.
So that means you are one of the people who were born in the 1920s.
1924, yeah.
Older than the Queen.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Hey, Ken, we got to know each other through community radio, and we'll talk a bit about the importance of that. But take us back. When did you first start getting involved in radio?
I was, let me see, how can I best put this? It goes back a long time. I would have been about 12 or 13 years of age, and I was a member of 3DB, Radio 3DB, the Herald Sun Station, children's program. And they had a competition running, and the competition was you had to put together, write out a script for a 1 hour program and add music to it in those days we had the old vinyl records, and you could pick out a few tracks off the vinyls and put it with it. And I, at the time, was very keen, which amazes me, very keen on classical music at the age of 12. And each week when I got pocket money, I'd go down and pay off a record, and I had quite a collection of those classical music, and that's where I started. 3DB. I won the competition. I got a cheque for 10 shillings, I think it was, and I was able to go in. The prize was you go in and put the program on air. And you do it, of course, with the help of the wonderful early radio announcers of the time. There was two of them, John Stewart and Monty Blandford. I'm sure some of the elderly listeners would remember those names. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful people.
Ken
was on the air at about 12 years of age with each one of those gentlemen, one either side of me, and they'd work the panel and put the music on, and I'd do the stuff I'd written out, all about the actual composers of the music we were playing. So that's where I started.
Ken, did it light a passionate fire in you to pursue a radio career with vigour? Because I suppose at the age of 12, career options would be just starting to think in a young boy's mind as to what he wanted to do.
That was what I wanted as my career, but my parents saw it in a different light, and they steered me off of it because they thought it would have been a very insecure job, and they were probably right. It is pretty insecure. You never know when you work is not really required anymore. And very recently, there was one of the well-known radio stations who shed a lot of their personnel. which is such a shame because quite a few of them were very, very good at their work. So you never know. And so instead of that, I did pharmacy, and I think that was a much better career.
If it makes you feel any better, Ken, 40 years later, I was sitting with my parents saying, I think I'd like to get into radio. And they said, no, that's not a terribly secure thing to do. Go and get yourself a proper job. And I became a school teacher. So there's a bit of a parallel there. So you went into pharmacy, and I'm doing some maths in my head here. But at some point of time, World War II popped up, and that you had some involvement in that.
Yes, I did. I joined the Air Force as soon as I turned 18. And I did 4.5 years in the Air Force during World War II. We formed our squadron of Beaufighters, an aeroplane that was remarkable in its achievements, and it was formed in 1942. And just recently, they're having a reunion with mainly about a heritage museum if anyone goes to Wagga Wagga, should go out to the airfield and have a look at that heritage museum, which is brilliant. Absolutely. It's, so they're celebrating that, and that's coming up in a few months' time, I think, yeah.
Wagga Wagga, a town so good they had to name it twice.
That's quite true. Hey, Ken, your time in...
Something to do with water, I think.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Ken, your time in the Air Force, did you see a lot of the horrors of war, or were you more in a support role to the more dangerous stuff that was going on?
To tell you the truth, I don't talk about the war.
Well, that's the reason I asked the question, because my late father-in-law saw it, but he would talk about it to a point, but not beyond, and I just wondered whether you were the same.
I think those of us who were facing daily death, if you like, because every now and every bash that you go on, the chances are you mightn't come back, and it's pretty devastating when your friends, are not there anymore. They're there one day, and the next day they're gone. And you're thinking of the parents, because some of them were only 21, 22 years of age, and that's pretty horrible.
Ken, without going into detail, did it change who you were? Did it change your character?
Oh, you grow up very fast. Yeah, I think you've got to be able to face some pretty horrible things and come out of it okay. Some find it very difficult. They used to call it, I'm trying to think of what it was. But anyway, the point was it affected a lot of people. Being away from home for long periods, maybe a year or so, without seeing your family is pretty hard. Particularly older men. When I say older, they were in their 30s, so would be aparted from their wives and maybe family as well. So it's one of those times when I think you grow up pretty fast.
So moving to happier times in the second half of the 40s and into the 50s, I was just doing some maths here in my head. You would have completed your pharmacy before the war. Did you complete your studies afterwards? Is that how it worked?
Yeah, actually, I left school when I was 16, and then I couldn't join the Air Force till I was 18, so I got a job as a lab assistant in a factory out at Fisherman's Bend. And so I had to do that for 2 years, and then I joined the Air Force. Now, I didn't do any pharmacy until after the war, and I was given the opportunity of doing the pharmacy course, 4 years of it. And that was it was paid for by the government rehabilitation scheme. It was called, and you could pick any course you wanted to do, and providing they thought you could do it, then they'd give you that opportunity, and that's what I did. So it was a gap of 4 years or so from the time I left school to the time I started to study again to pass the pharmacy course. So, and during that time that was hard because you weren't used to studying. You had a different lifestyle altogether in the Air Force. So it wasn't easy, but it was well worth the effort in the long term.
So you ended up running your own pharmacy or pharmacies?
Yeah, that's interesting because as soon as I graduated, I had the opportunity of an empty shop in East Brighton, and I live in East Brighton now, which is, I've done the rounds. And then I opened that from an empty shop and made it a pharmacy. And that was the first one I had. The second one, after that was going well, I got one in the city. I got one in the Victoria Hotel, and I bought one there, and I ran that for a few years. That was a fabulous pharmacy, that one, because it was placed in Little Collins Street, right opposite the back door of the Tivoli Theatre. And in those days, of course, the Tivoli was a vaudeville theatre, brilliant, full of overseas stars that they'd bring out. And, of course, that itself was wonderful. And so I used to get all the overseas stars in. Mainly, they liked to come in and have a chat, and then they used to bring me a photo or sign something. I had a visitor's book. So I met some fabulous people that were quite famous in their day. And then the last pharmacy I had was in East Bentley, which is pretty close to still where I'm living at the moment. So all that came to a crashing halt when I sold the last one, and then went overseas to work in England for 5 years, dragged the family over. I had a wife and 4 children, and so we had 5 years in England.
When you were in England, were you working as a pharmacist?
Oh, yes, I did. I went over there to work, actually, and I worked. The chemist that I was attached to, due to the fact that I had to convince the government of the English government that I was there to work and to introduce new things. Otherwise, they could use the local chemists. So I worked. The chemist that I worked for had 4 or 5 pharmacies in the undergrounds around London, and I worked there 5 years, and eventually, which was wonderful because I was moved from one pharmacy to another, and so I had the opportunity of meeting some wonderful people, working with wonderful people, and enjoying a different country, a different culture. I really had a great time, and I don't think I learned anything different to what we had here in Australia, because we were well up with everything, whereas I was disappointed. I thought that they'd be well ahead in England, but no, in many cases things were behind what we were doing here in Australia. So it was an interesting experiment from my point of view, and they were great people that I worked for and with. So, it's great memories, because I've written about some of it about that in a book that I'm hoping to be published in the very near future.
Excellent. We'll certainly need to hear when that happens, because we can certainly pump it up on the Two Blokes Chatting radio show. So you came back to Australia and you got involved in something that Robert and I have got involved in, and it's actually where you and I met. You got involved in community radio.
Absolutely. And as I always had a love of radio from the time I was, very young, 11, 12, it was like heaven. This is what I wanted to do. I remember sitting in front of the mics on many occasions. I was running a show called Anything Goes, which was very similar to that. And I had a cast of thousands, but in actual fact I had about 3 or 4 on the show with me. And I can remember sitting in front of the mics maybe minutes before you start and put on your theme song and get right into it. I'm thinking to myself, this is it. This is what I've always wanted to do, and now I'm doing it.
And you also did a program called Here's Health, as I recall.
Yeah, that's one that I really enjoyed doing too, because it introduced a lot of the knowledge I had and experience I'd had in pharmacy. And I used to often have people in the industry, in the health industry, doctors, surgeons sometimes I've had, nurses, all sorts of people in the health industry. And also I'd talk about common problems, with health, and get some really good people in to help the program along, which was very educational. I learned such a lot myself, and I'm hoping, of course, that the people listening in and the sponsors also got that knowledge as well. So, yeah, it was fun. It was also quite serious when it came to some. I missed out, of course. I haven't done it for a while now, but the opportunity would have been there had I still been on air to talk about what we're going through at the moment with the viruses and things. So maybe, there's plenty there. But also I had Sally Ann McCormick. Sally Ann was wonderful to work with. She's a psychologist, and a very, very good one. And so she and I ran a program it was all part of Here's Health. And so, we brought forward a lot of common ailments like depression and things like that, which a lot of people are suffering from, being thrown out of work or being isolated due to the fact that they picked up the virus. All those things were very, very good to be able to give advice on. And but I wasn't in it for the time that it really hit hard. I'd retired. Maybe it was a good thing in a way, because then I wouldn't have to sit in a small studio with other people wearing masks and things. So it's very difficult to get through under the circumstances. A lot of people are still getting sick, and I think a program on health is always very, very important to let people know. In lay terms, I think that's the thing. People who understand that a lot of the common ailments are dealt with either in a natural way and I tend to lean towards natural treatments as against a lot of chemical stuff that I think we could do without. But
yeah, it was a program that was a bit unusual on community radio, because a lot of community radio programs, and you're talking on one now, can be a bit silly at times, but it was an hour on a Monday. It was just really serious content, but really well presented. And I'm not saying that because Ken's on the phone. It was in a way that people could listen and understand. It was just, unfortunately, a lot of us were working at the time and didn't get to hear it very often. But now, Ken, we are coming towards the end of our time, and we could, as I often say at this stage of our special guest conversation, we could be here all day and just keep chatting. But one thing I did want to mention to people, because we might be able to raise $1 or two, is you are participating in a very, very important event coming up very, very soon. Tell us a bit about your run, in inverted commas.
Oh, yes. Well, this will be my third time, I think, that I've done this. But I do it for two reasons. One of them is the fact that I think it's good for my health. And secondly, I think it's good because I do it for charity. I do it to raise money for the Stroke Foundation. A stroke is something that my wife died of, and so I do it in her honour. But it's a great day. It's a great day in Melbourne, and it's called Run Melbourne. What's it called? Run
Melbourne, I think it's called, isn't
it? Run Melbourne.
Yeah, I think it is.
But anyway, it is I don't run, I walk. I think at 97 you can't run too well. So I think walking, and I usually do the 5Ks, 5 kilometres, and I'll be doing that on the 24th of July. Is Run Melbourne Marathon.
So I've got the link. I'll put that on our Facebook page, and if people who are listening want to support you, we will see if we can't raise a few more bucks for the Stroke Foundation, because it's a really important thing you're doing. And at 97, I did the Mother's Day Classic this year, Ken, which was a 4K run, and I'm not 97, and I got through the first kilometre before I thought, no, I'm just going to walk the rest of this. So I'm on your side when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think that's you know your limitations, and I think that's important.
And the station has a connection with one of the doyens of Melbourne radio. I'm sure you listened to in your time, Doug Ayton, who lives here locally, and he spent a lot of time on Pulse Radio in Geelong here, and he has also been a victim of stroke and recovering down here at the moment. So for those regular Pulse listeners, and listen to Doug in the time, if you want an extra motivation to support this cause, please think of our own Doug Ayton, as well as 5WBC's Ken Lyons. Three WBC. I get the South Australian mixed up. 3 WBC radio icon Ken Lyons. We have one in our own world, Doug Ayton, who's also recovering from stroke. So best wishes to you both, and a bit of thought for fundraising. Ken, all the very best. Thank you very much for your time this morning, and good luck with your endeavours, and we hope we can be ringing you again in 2 years and 3 months when you've received the letter from the Queen on your 100th birthday.
Well, look, I'm quite serious. I hope to get to 100, and I would really, really love to do that. So I'm doing everything possible to keep myself. I've got, 2 and a bit years to get to 100. So.
Yeah, well, I'm backing you in to be still around 100, more so than I'm backing this radio show to be here to talk to you.
Dear.
We will talk to you again, Ken, hopefully when that book comes out. Certainly keep in touch, and all the very best for your walk on the 24th of July. We'll get that link on our Facebook page. Hopefully we can raise you a few extra dollars.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Ken Lyons there, and what an absolute legend he is.